What kind of civilization can be conquered by the greatest empires in history and still refuse to disappear? From Alexander the Great to Genghis Khan, from Arab armies to modern revolutions, Iran has faced destruction music again and again. Yet, against every odd, it endured. But how? What secret allowed this civilization to last for more than 5,000 years while others faded forever? But before we start, be sure to subscribe to Talk History. After that, drop a comment and let us know which ancient civilization you believe was the most resilient of all time. All right, let's journey back in time and uncover the mystery of Iran. What kind of land survives everything? What kind of civilization gets conquered repeatedly and yet refuses to vanish? For millennia, the world's great powers marched toward the same destination, the vast, unforgiving plateau we now call Iran. They arrived with certainty, with arrogance, with armies that had already crushed empires and redrawn maps. And every single one believed the same thing this time: it will be different. From the west came Alexander the Great, leading one of the most disciplined armies the ancient world had ever witnessed. His phalanxes sliced through kingdoms like a blade through silk. Cities collapsed, torch musica, torch palaces burned. Even the mighty Persian capital of Persepolis was turned to ash. A symbol, perhaps, that an entire civilization had finally been wiped out. Centuries later, others followed. Rome's legions pushed eastward, determined to bring order to what they saw as a chaotic frontier. Then came the armies of a new faith, sweeping out of the Arabian Peninsula with unstoppable momentum, carrying a message that would reshape half the globe. And when even that wasn't enough, the storm arrived. From the depths of the steppe, Hamusic Genghis Khan unleashed a force so destructive that entire cities vanished from memory. Pyramids of skulls marked the path of conquest. Rivers ran black with ash. For many civilizations, this would have been the end, not just of power, but of identity itself. Yet Iran did not vanish. It did something far more unsettling. It persisted, but not in the way you might imagine. This was not a story of constant military triumph. Iran lost battles, it lost capitals, trahe musica, it lost empires. Time and again, it was brought to its knees by forces that seemed unstoppable. Still, it survived. How? That is where the mystery deepens, because something strange kept happening after every conquest. Something nearly impossible to explain. The invaders, those who arrived as destroyers, did not remain unchanged. They adapted, they absorbed, they became part of the very civilization they had tried to erase. Languages shifted, courts transformed, traditions spread silently like roots beneath the surface. Within a few generations, conquerors no longer ruled as outsiders. They ruled as Iranians. It was as if this land possessed an invisible force, not one that halted armies at its borders, but one that slowly, patiently changed them from within. And that raises a question far more dangerous than any army. What kind of civilization doesn't just survive conquest, but consumes its conquerors? Because to understand Iran is not to study a nation that resisted history. It is to face a civilization that rewrote the rules of survival itself. And to uncover that secret, we must go back to the very beginning, to a time before empires, before kings, when this land was not yet called Iran, but was already becoming something the world would never be able to destroy. Long before empires clashed and kings carved their names into stone, this land was already whispering a story, not of conquest, but of identity. Imagine a vast plateau surrounded by mountains that scraped the sky and deserts that seemed to stretch into eternity. For thousands of years, this region was more than just a crossroads of civilizations. It was a place where something deeper was forming, something invisible yet powerful enough to outlive empires. But who were the first to shape it? To answer that, We must go back to a time when the people who would one day call themselves Iranians had not yet arrived. Before them, ancient cultures already thrived here, building cities, crafting pottery, organizing societies that rivaled those of Mesopotamia. Among them were the Elamites, a civilization strong enough to challenge early empires and sophisticated enough to leave behind some of the first diplomatic agreements in human history. Yet they were not the ones who would define the future of this land. That turning point came when new people arrived. They came not as conquerors, but as migrants moving slowly across the vast steppes of Central Asia. They were part of a larger family known today as the Indo-Iranians, distant linguistic cousins of those who would later speak Latin, Greek, and many modern European languages. But what they brought with them was not just a language, it was a worldview. They called themselves Aryans, a word that meant noble, and the land they settled became known as the land of the Aryans. A name that over centuries would evolve into something we now recognize, Iran. Among these peoples, two groups would rise above the rest, the Medes and the Persians. At first, they were just tribes, scattered, adapting, surviving, but within them lay the seed of something greater, not just political power, but a shared identity that would define this land for millennia. And at the heart of that identity was an idea, one that would shape not only their civilization, but influence religions and philosophies far beyond their borders. It was called Zoroastrianism. In this belief system, the world was not random, not chaotic. It was a battlefield, a cosmic struggle between two opposing forces, truth and lies, light and darkness, order and chaos. On one side stood Ahura Mazda, the embodiment of truth, light, and creation. On the other stood Angra Mainyu, the force of destruction, deception, and disorder. Every human life, every action, every decision was part of this eternal conflict. And suddenly, existence had meaning. This idea changed everything. For the people of this land, being Iranian was no longer just about geography or tribe. It was about choosing a side, about defending order against chaos, about standing even in the face of destruction, as part of something larger than themselves. And perhaps without realizing it, they created the very foundation of their future survival. Because a civilization built only on power can fall, but a civilization built on an idea can endure anything. And soon from these clears throat, tribes shaped by belief and identity, a new force would rise. One that would not only unify this land, but reshape the entire known world. What does it take to build the first empire the world could not ignore? Not just a kingdom, not just a conquest, but something far more ambitious. A system capable of ruling millions across continents without collapsing under its own weight. The answer begins with a man whose vision was as dangerous as it was revolutionary: Cyrus the Great. He did not rise from a vacuum. He emerged from a world of tribes, rivalries, and fragile alliances. A world where power was measured in how much you could destroy. But Cyrus imagined something different. When he defeated the Medes, he did not annihilate them. He united them, Trochia and Musica Troch. When he conquered Babylon, he did not burn it. He walked in as a liberator. To the Jews held in exile, he offered something no conqueror had before: freedom. To the Babylonians, he presented himself not as a foreign ruler, but as a chosen protector of their gods. It was a strategy so subtle, so effective, that it changed the very definition of conquest. Because Cyrus understood something others did not. People obey out of fear, but they remain loyal out of respect. And with that idea, the impossible began to happen. An empire was born, not through destruction alone, but through integration. From the mountains of Anatolia to the deserts of Egypt, from the Indus Valley to the heart of Mesopotamia, lands that had once been rivals were now part of a single political system. This was the Achaemenid Empire, the first true superpower. But building an empire is one thing, Trocha musica Troy, keeping it alive is another. That responsibility would fall to a successor who transformed Cyrus's vision into something even more extraordinary. Darius the Great. Darius did not just rule an empire. He engineered it. He divided the vast territory into provinces known as satrapies, each governed locally but connected to a central authority. Taxes were standardized, laws were organized. A unified currency brought economic stability to regions that had never shared a system before. And then came something even more powerful: connection. A vast network of roads stretched across the empire, linking distant cities with a speed the ancient world had never seen. Messages could travel thousands of kilometers in days, not months. It was not just an empire. It was an infrastructure of control, an organism. And for a moment in history, it worked. Nearly half the world's population lived under Persian rule. Different languages, religions, cultures, all functioning within a system that did not demand uniformity, but loyalty. It was a delicate balance, and like all delicate things, it could break. Because the larger the empire grew, the harder it became to control. Internal tensions simmered. Distant provinces tested the limits of authority, and beyond its borders, new enemies were watching, waiting. Among them were small, divided city-states to the west, fragmented, competitive, and seemingly insignificant. The Greeks. To the Persians, they were a minor problem. To history, they would become something far more dangerous. Because sometimes the greatest threats do not come from powerful empires, but from underestimated ones. And soon, the empire that had mastered the art of ruling the world would face an enemy that refused to be ruled. What happens when an unstoppable force meets a civilization that refuses to disappear? By the time Alexander the Great turned his gaze eastward, Trocha music soar, he had already done the impossible. He had unified Greece. He had crushed rival kingdoms. And now, standing at the edge of Asia, he prepared to confront the greatest empire the world had ever seen, Persia. To many, this was not just another campaign. It was a mission of revenge, a chance to avenge past Persian invasions and prove once and for all the superiority of the Greek world. But Alexander's ambition went far beyond revenge. He did not want to defeat Persia. He wanted to replace it. In 334 BC, his army crossed into Persian territory. What followed was a series of battles that would echo through history: Granicus, Issus, and finally Gaugamela. Each one pushing deeper into the heart of the empire. Each one breaking what once seemed unbreakable. The Persian king fled, the armies collapsed, and one by one, the symbols of imperial power fell into Alexander's hands. Then came the moment that seemed to seal Persia's fate: Persepolis, the ceremonial capital, the heart of an empire that had ruled the world. Alexander entered it not as a diplomat, but as a conqueror. And then he burned it. Flames consumed the palaces. Columns cracked under heat. Centuries of history turned to ash in a single night. To the outside world, the message was clear: Persia was finished, erased, forgotten. But something unexpected began to happen. Something no army could control. Because after the destruction came transformation. Alexander did not leave Persia behind. He stayed. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the conqueror began to change. He adopted Persian clothing. He embraced court rituals that once belonged to the very kings he had defeated. He married Persian nobility. He even began to present himself not as a foreign ruler, but as the rightful successor of the Persian Empire. To his own men, this was shocking, disturbing. Had they not come to destroy Persia? Had they not fought to prove their superiority? Now their king seemed to be becoming the very thing they had conquered. Tension spread through the ranks. Whispers of betrayal grew louder. But Alexander saw something they did not. He understood that ruling such a vast empire required more than force. It required music legitimacy, and legitimacy could not be imposed. It had to be inherited. So instead of erasing Persia, he tried to become it, to fuse East and West into a single civilization, a new world. It was a bold vision, perhaps too bold, because when Alexander died suddenly at just 32 years old, that vision died with him. His empire fractured almost instantly. Generals turned against each other. Territories were divided, and the unity he had built collapsed into chaos. But Persia did not vanish. It endured beneath the surface, waiting. Because while empires rose and fell above it, something deeper remained untouched, a cultural core, a way of thinking, a system of identity that could not be burned, conquered, or divided. And once again, history revealed its pattern. Persia could be defeated, but it could not be erased. And soon, from within the ruins of foreign rule, a new Persian power would rise, stronger and more resilient, and ready to face the next empire that believed it could do what none before had ever achieved. What do you call a civilization that survives not one collapse, but many? After the death of Alexander the Great, the world he tried to unite shattered almost instantly. His empire fractured into competing kingdoms, each ruled by ambitious generals who fought to claim his legacy. And in the middle of that chaos, Persia waited. Not as a fallen empire, but as something far more dangerous, a civilization that refused to disappear. For nearly a century, Greek rulers controlled the region through the Seleucid Empire. They built cities, spread their language, and attempted to reshape the land in their own image. But beneath the surface, something was growing, something native, something patient. Then, from the eastern frontiers, a new power emerged, the Parthians. They were not kings raised in marble palaces or heirs to ancient thrones. They were warriors of the steppe, masters of mobility, archers who could strike while retreating, a tactic so effective it would become legendary. And with that advantage, they did something few thought possible. They pushed the Greeks out. Persia was no longer ruled by outsiders. It was rising again. Under Parthian control, the region transformed into a formidable empire that stretched across vast territories. But its true test did not come from the east. It came from the west, from Rome, the most disciplined military machine of its time. Roman legions marched eastward, confident, organized, unstoppable. They had conquered Gaul, crushed Carthage, and dominated the Mediterranean. Tuacha musicator. They expected Persia to be no different. They were wrong. In the deserts and plains of the east, the Parthians did not fight like the enemies Rome was used to. They moved fast. They struck from a distance. They disappeared before retaliation. And then came one of Rome's most humiliating defeats. At the Battle of Cara, a Roman army was not just beaten, it was dismantled. Thousands of soldiers were killed or captured. The myth of Roman invincibility cracked. And once again, Iran had done something extraordinary. It had stopped an empire that seemed unstoppable. But survival was not enough, because history does not rest. And from within, change was coming. In the 3rd century, a new dynasty rose from the heart of Persia, itself the Sassanids. Unlike the Parthians who ruled through a looser system, the Sassanids sought control, centralization, power. They rebuilt the empire with a clear identity, reviving ancient traditions and establishing Zoroastrianism as a state religion. Society became structured, organized, defined. And with that, Persia entered a new golden age. But it also entered a new cycle of conflict. For centuries, the Sassanid Empire stood face to face with a familiar enemy, Tuacha music, towards Rome, and later the Byzantine Empire. War after war drained both sides. Armies marched endlessly across the same lands. Victories were temporary. Losses were costly. Neither side could fully defeat the other. It was a stalemate of giants, But every war leaves scars, and over time those scars began to weaken the empire from within. Resources were exhausted. Population strained, stability began to fracture. And just as Persia and Byzantium stood locked in their endless struggle, a new force began to rise from the south, faster, more unified, driven not just by ambition but by belief. And this time, the challenge would not come as another empire seeking territory. It would come as something far more transformative, a new civilization, a new religion, a force that would not just conquer land, but redefine it. What happens when a civilization is not only invaded, but transformed from its very foundations? By the 7th century, Persia was exhausted. Decades of brutal war against the Byzantine Empire had drained its strength. Armies were weakened, the economy strained. The once mighty Sassanid Empire, proud, organized, and deeply rooted in its traditions, was no longer unshakable. And that was when something unexpected emerged from the south. Not a massive empire, not a long-established power, but a force driven by something far more powerful than armies alone: faith. From the Arabian Peninsula, a new movement began to expand with astonishing speed. Church and music, united under a single belief, a single message, a single purpose: Islam. What started as a regional transformation quickly became a wave of expansion that reshaped the map of the world. Within a few decades, Arab armies reached the borders of Persia, and then they crossed them. The battles that followed were decisive. The Sassanid defenses, once formidable, could not hold. One by one, strongholds fell, cities were taken. The imperial structure that had stood for centuries began to collapse, and in 651, it happened. The last Sassanid ruler was defeated. Persia once again had been conquered, but this conquest was different. This was not just a political takeover. It was a civilizational shift. With the new rulers came a new language, Arabic, a new religion, music, Islam, a new system of governance. For many civilizations, this would have been the end of their identity. History had shown it before. Regions like Egypt and Syria, once centers of ancient cultures, gradually lost their original identities and became fully integrated into the Arab world. By all logic, Persia should have followed the same path. But it didn't, because once again, something unexpected began to happen. Music happened. Instead of disappearing, Persian culture adapted. It absorbed. It transformed the very system that had conquered it. Yes, Islam spread across the region. Over time, it became the dominant religion, but it did not erase what came before. It blended with it. Persian administrators became essential to the new Islamic empires. Their methods of governance, refined over centuries, were adopted and expanded. The Persian language, far from disappearing, evolved. It absorbed Arabic influences but remained alive, becoming a powerful medium for poetry, science, and philosophy. And slowly, subtly, the conquerors began to change. The Islamic world itself was influenced by Persian culture, its bureaucracy, its art, its intellectual traditions. It was no longer just an Arab empire ruling Persia. It was a new civilization, shaped in part by Persia itself. Once again, the pattern repeated. Iran had been conquered, but not erased, because its identity did not depend on who ruled it, but on something deeper, something that could survive even the most profound transformations. And yet, if this moment proved anything, it was that survival came at a cost. Because even as Persia adapted and endured, the world around it was changing faster than ever before. New powers were rising, new threats were forming, and soon, from the far reaches of the east, a storm unlike anything before would descend upon this land. A storm that would not seek to rule, but to destroy everything in its path. By the 13th century, the world was about to find out. From the distant steppes of Central Asia, a force began to move, not slowly, not cautiously, but like a storm unleashed upon the earth. It did not negotiate, it did not integrate, it annihilated. At its center stood Genghis Khan. His armies were unlike anything the world had ever seen: fast, disciplined, relentless. They crossed mountains, deserts, and rivers with terrifying efficiency. Cities that resisted were not conquered, they were erased. When the Mongols reached Iran, they brought with them a level of destruction so complete that it defied comprehension. Entire cities vanished, populations were slaughtered, irrigation systems built over centuries were destroyed in days, turning fertile lands into barren silence. Libraries burned, knowledge disappeared, and in some places, the dead were so many that survivors could not bury them all. For many observers of the time, it seemed certain this was the end, not just of an empire, but of a civilization. Because unlike previous conquerors, the Mongols did not arrive to rule a functioning society. They arrived to break it completely. And for a moment, it worked. Iran was shattered. Its political structures collapsed. Its cities lay in ruins. Its people were scattered, traumatized, diminished. If there was ever a moment when this civilization could truly disappear, this was it. But then, something unexpected began to happen. Something that had happened before, something that would happen again. The conquerors began to change. After the initial wave of destruction, the Mongols did what all empires eventually must do. They tried to govern. And that is when they encountered something they could not destroy. A culture, a system, a way of organizing the world that was older than their conquest and more sophisticated than their methods of rule. Gradually, Mongol rulers in the region, especially under the Ilkhanate, began to adopt Persian administrative practices. In music, they relied on local scholars, bureaucrats, and intellectuals to rebuild what they had destroyed. Then came an even deeper transformation. They converted. Islam, already music deeply rooted in the region, began to shape Mongol rulers themselves. And with it came the influence of Persian culture, in language, in art, in governance. Persian became the language of administration. Persian architecture flourished again. Persian scholars returned to positions of influence. And within a few generations, the descendants of the destroyers were no longer outsiders. They were part of the civilization they had once tried to erase. Once again, the music, the pattern revealed itself. Iran did not defeat the Mongols on the battlefield. It did something far more extraordinary: it absorbed them. And just when it seemed that history had reached its limit of destruction, another conqueror appeared, equally brutal, equally devastating. A man who would leave behind pyramids of skulls as monuments to his power. A man the world would remember as Timur or Tamerlane. And once again, the question would be asked, can anything survive this? Or will this finally be the moment when Iran disappears forever? By the early 16th century, Iran was no longer a unified empire. It was a fragmented land, a battlefield of competing dynasties, tribal conflicts, and foreign influences. Mongols, Turks, and local rulers had all left their mark. Power shifted constantly. Stability was fragile. But beneath that chaos, something was waiting. A force not just seeking control, but identity. And from that uncertainty emerged a new dynasty, the Safavids. They were not simply another ruling family trying to claim territory. They carried something far more ambitious: a vision to reshape Iran from within, to give it a new soul. At the center of this transformation stood a bold and controversial decision toward music, toward religion. Until that moment, most of the Islamic world, including much of Iran, followed Sunni Islam. It was the dominant tradition shared across vast empires, but the Safavids chose a different path. They imposed Twelver Shia Islam as the official religion of the state. Not gradually, not peacefully, but decisively. It was a move that would redefine the region forever. Mosques changed, religious leaders were replaced, Entire communities were forced to adapt to a new spiritual structure. Resistance existed, but the transformation continued, and with it a new identity was born. For the first time in centuries, Iran was not just surviving under external influence. It was defining itself clearly, distinctly, and deliberately against the rest of the Islamic world. This was more than religion. Music, it was a boundary, a statement, a line drawn between Iran and its powerful neighbors, especially the Ottoman Empire, which remained firmly Sunni. And in that division, something remarkable happened. Iran became unique again, but the Safavids did not stop there. They rebuilt cities. They encouraged art, architecture, philosophy, and science. Persian culture, which had survived through adaptation for centuries, now flourished openly once more, not as a hidden influence, but as the foundation of a renewed state. A new Iran emerged, not identical to its ancient past, but deeply connected to it. And within this transformation, an ancient word began to rise again, one that had existed quietly for centuries, used more by the people than by outsiders. A name rooted in identity itself, Iran. Derived from ancient origins, meaning the land of the Aryans, it carried a sense of continuity, a link between past and present, between ancient tribes and a modernizing state. But beyond its borders, the world still knew this land by another name, Persia, a name given by outsiders, a name tied to ancient glory, but also to foreign perception. Two identities, one internal, one external, and for a time they coexisted. But not forever, because in the centuries to come, a new kind of leader would rise, not from ancient dynasties or tribal alliances, but from a modern vision of power. A man who would make a decision so simple, yet so symbolic, that it would force the entire world to see this civilization differently. Not as Persia, but as something else, something older, something music intentional, something called Iran. For centuries, this land had been known by two identities. To its people, it was Iran, a name rooted in ancient origins, echoing the idea of a noble land, a civilization tied to something deeper than borders. But to the outside world, it was Persia, a name carried across Greek texts, Roman histories, and European imagination. A name that evoked grandeur, kings, empires, poetry, silk, and gold, but also something else: distance, exoticism, a civilization admired but not fully understood. By the early 20th century, the world itself was changing. Empires were collapsing, new nations were emerging, and in this shifting landscape, Iran stood at a crossroads, caught between its ancient identity and the pressures of a modern world that demanded reinvention. At the center of this transformation stood a man determined to reshape his country's future. Reza Shah Pahlavi. He was not a king born into centuries of unquestioned tradition. He was a modernizer, a reformer, a leader who believed that for Iran to survive in a rapidly changing world, it needed to redefine itself. Not just internally, but globally. He introduced sweeping reforms. Infrastructure expanded, industry grew, the military was strengthened, education systems were modernized. Iran was no longer content to be seen as a relic of ancient history. It wanted to be recognized as a modern nation. But there was one problem: the name. Persia, though rich in history, carried with it centuries of external interpretation, shaped largely by Western narratives. It represented a past that, while glorious, no longer reflected the image Reza Shah wanted to project. So, in 1935, he made a decision that would music echo across the world. A formal request was sent to foreign governments. From that moment on, the country would be known internationally not as Persia, but as Iran. It was a simple change, just a word. And yet, it carried enormous weight, because this was not merely a linguistic adjustment. It was a declaration, a statement of identity, a rejection of how others had defined this civilization, and an insistence on defining itself. but not everyone agreed. Within the country, some saw the name Persia as a link to a magnificent past, to the Achaemenids, to Cyrus the Great, to a legacy that had shaped the world. To abandon it felt, to some, like losing a part of that heritage. And so, a tension emerged between past and future, between perception and identity, between what the world saw and what Iran chose to be. And history, as always, did not stop there. Because just decades later, another transformation would shake the country to its core. A revolution, a collapse of monarchy, a new system built not on royal authority, but on religious power. And once again, the world would look at Iran and struggle to understand it. Because behind every name, every regime, every transformation, there remained something constant, something older than kings, stronger than empires, a civilization that had learned across thousands of years how to survive, not by resisting change, but by redefining itself. And that brings us to the final question. After everything, invasions, empires, revolutions, what is Iran really? What does it mean to truly survive? Is it to win every war, to conquer every enemy? Or is it something far more difficult, far more enduring? Because if history has shown us anything, it is this: even the greatest empires fall. Rome fell, the Mongols fractured, Troy Alexander's empire vanished almost as quickly as it rose. And yet, Iran remained, not unchanged, not untouched, but still present, still alive. The 20th century would test that survival once again. After the reforms of Reza Shah Pahlavi, the country stepped into the modern world, but not without tension. Foreign influence, internal divisions, and political pressure created a fragile balance. And then, in 1979, that balance collapsed. A revolution erupted, the monarchy was overthrown, and in its place emerged a new system, the Islamic Shia Music Republic. It was a transformation as profound as any conquest in the past. Power shifted. Society changed. Iran redefined itself once again, not as a kingdom, not as an empire, but as a state rooted in religious authority. To the outside world, this new Iran was difficult to understand. For some, it became a symbol of conflict. For music, others, resistance. For many, a mystery. But beneath the headlines, beneath the politics, beneath the tensions that dominate modern narratives, something familiar remained. The same pattern, the same resilience. Because this was not the first time Iran had transformed itself. It had done so after Alexander, after the Arabs, after the Mongols, after centuries of fragmentation. Each time, it changed form, but not essence. And that is the key. Because Iran was never just an empire, it was never just a dynasty, it was never just a name, Persia or Iran. It was something deeper, a civilization built on continuity, on adaptation, on the ability to absorb what comes from outside and reshape it from within. While other civilizations disappeared into history, their languages lost, their identities dissolved, Iran developed something rare, a mechanism of survival not through isolation, but through transformation. It did not resist change, it mastered it. And that is why, after 5,000 years of invasions, revolutions, and reinventions, it still stands. Not as a relic of the past, but as a living continuation of it. So perhaps the real question is not how did Iran survive, but rather what does Iran understand about history that so many other civilizations never did? Because in the end, survival is not about avoiding destruction. It is about becoming something that destruction cannot erase. Iran's story is not just about kings' wars or empires. It is about identity, about a civilization that refused to disappear, not by resisting the world, but by absorbing it, reshaping it, and continuing forward. And maybe that is the lesson history leaves us with. Power fades, empires collapse, names change. But culture, identity, memory, those can outlive everything. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this video, and are passionate about this type of content. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss upcoming videos and discover more fascinating stories. See you in the next video.